In Hollywood, the people closest to a star often knew exactly where to strike. Clara Bow's closest friend stole her money in private letters, then exposed her secrets in court. Debbie Reynolds' husband gambled away both fortunes and left her sleeping in her car. Dorothy Stratton arrived with $1,100 for the husband she was leaving and never walked out. 1. Music. Clara Bow, betrayed by Daisy DeVoe. Clara Bow gave Daisy DeVoe access to the money, letters, and secrets, music, she hid even from the men in her life. DeVoe began as Bow's hairstylist, became her closest friend and secretary, and helped create a private account only the music, two women could access. After Bow fired her in 1930, DeVoe left with the actress's checkbook, cash, jewelry, and personal, music, papers. She demanded $125,000 from Paramount for their return, then offered to give everything back if Bow restored her job. Bow called the police. Bow accused DeVoe of taking about music, $16,000. In court, DeVoe retaliated with private letters, music, claims that Bow drank heavily and seduced married men, and details, music, about a $2,000 watch purchased for singer Harry Richman. Newspapers printed, music, the testimony nationwide, and some theaters stopped showing Bow's films. DeVoe faced 35 grand theft counts, but was convicted on only one involving an $825 check used for a fur coat and received 18 months. After the verdict, Bow asked the judge for leniency while DeVoe buried her face in her hands and cried in the packed courtroom. 2. Jackie Coogan, betrayed by his mother and stepfather. Jackie Coogan earned nearly $4 million as a child, then learned his mother considered every dollar her property. Music. After the kid made him internationally famous, Coogan worked through the 1920s while receiving a weekly allowance of only $6.25. Music. His earnings funded the family's houses, expensive cars, fur coats, diamonds, and jewelry. He believed his father had protected the rest, music, in a trust that would become his at 21. His father died in a 1935 automobile accident. The day before Coogan's 21st birthday, his mother gave him $1,000. When he asked for the remaining fortune, she told him he did not have a cent and that the money was hers. She later married Arthur Bernstein, the family's former business manager. In 1938, Coogan sued them for approximately $4 million. Only about $250,000 remained, and after the settlement and legal expenses, he received $126,000. During the lawsuit, Coogan ran out of money and asked Charlie Chaplin for help. Chaplin immediately handed his former co-star $1,000 in cash. 3. Debbie Reynolds betrayed by Harry Carl. Debbie Reynolds married Harry Carl believing the millionaire shoe magnate would protect her family, then discovered he had gambled away both fortunes. Carl lost his own millions at casinos, music, and secretly used Reynolds' earnings to cover debts, failed investments, music, and an expensive lifestyle. He also cheated repeatedly. Her teenage son, Todd Fisher, once hid in Carl's closet with a movie camera and filmed him with sex workers, music, giving the family proof Reynolds could no longer dismiss. By the time she filed for divorce in 1973, Carl's financial collapse had swallowed her savings, homes, jewelry, paintings, music, Rolls-Royce, and other possessions. Reynolds was left with debts reported at roughly $3 million. Carl still tried to obtain lifelong support from her during the divorce. Reynolds returned to nightclubs and casinos, sometimes performing 42 weeks a year, and spent nearly a decade paying creditors for obligations created behind her back. By 1983, she had finally cleared Carl's debts. During the worst period, she sometimes finished work with no home to return to and slept alone in her car. 4. Elvis Presley, betrayed by Colonel Tom Parker. Elvis Presley trusted Colonel Tom Parker with his career. After his death, court filings showed that some deals, music, paid Parker more than the star himself. By the 1970s, Parker was taking up to 50% of Presley's income, far above the usual 15 to 20% management commission. In 1973, 6. Music, RCA agreements ended future royalties on recordings made before that year. Court filings later showed that Elvis received $4.65 million, while Parker collected $6.2 million plus 10% of RCA's touring profits. Music, the arrangement became more damaging after Presley died in 1977. Parker continued claiming half of estate income while Graceland's expenses and taxes pushed the inheritance toward collapse. Because Lisa Marie Presley was still a child, a probate judge appointed attorney Blanchard Toole to investigate. Toole accused Parker of self-dealing, overreaching, and violating his duties to both Elvis and the estate. Music payments to Parker were stopped and the estate sued. In the 1983 settlement, Parker received about $2 million, transferred the Presley recordings and visual materials he owned, and agreed to end his involvement in Presley business for 5 years. 5. Greta Garbo, betrayed by Mercedes D'Acosta. Greta Garbo trusted Mercedes D'Acosta with private letters and photographs, then watched her turn that intimacy into a memoir and a museum collection. The women met in 1931 and remained close for nearly 3 decades. Music, Garbo, fiercely protective of her private life, sent D'Acosta letters, cards, and telegrams and allowed her to take photographs, music, during a secluded trip to the High Sierras. One image showed Garbo topless from behind. By 1959, D'Acosta was ill and short of money. She sold the bulk of her papers to Philadelphia's Rosenbach Museum and donated the Garbo correspondence under a sealing agreement. The following year, she published Here Lies the Heart. The memoir avoided directly naming Garbo as a lover, but surrounded their relationship with intimate suggestions and reproduced the topless photograph. Garbo immediately ended all contact. The museum sealed the correspondence until 10 years after both women had died. On April 15, 2000, archivists opened the collection. 55 letters, 17 cards, and 15 telegrams Garbo had written between 1931 and 1959. Music, 6. Mary Astor, betrayed by Franklin Thorpe. Mary Astor's ex-husband Franklin Thorpe used her stolen diary to blackmail her into surrendering custody of their 4-year-old daughter, Marilyn. Thorpe found the 2-volume diary while they were still married. It described Astor's affair with a married playwright George S. Kaufman, criticized Thorpe, and recorded intimate details that could damage her career. When Astor wanted a divorce, Thorpe threatened to expose the diary, music, and portray her as an unfit mother. In 1935, frightened that the pages would become public, she accepted a divorce settlement that left Marilyn primarily with him. A year later, Astor returned to court to regain custody. Thorpe's lawyers tried to use the diary against her while alleged excerpts and stories about Kaufman reached the newspapers. Tabloids turned the hearing into a nationwide sex scandal, music, and some supposed entries were challenged as altered or fabricated. Judge Goodwin Knight refused to admit the diary as evidence. On August 13, 1936, Astor won custody of Marilyn during the school year. Thorpe received weekends and vacations. The diary was sealed by the court and destroyed in 1952. 7. Patty Duke, music, betrayed by John and Ethel Ross. Patty Duke was 8 when managers John and Ethel Ross took her from her mother, erased her name, and began living on her earnings. They told Anna Marie Duke, "Anna Marie is dead. You're Patty now." The Rosses controlled where she lived, whom she saw, what she ate, and how she behaved at auditions. Her mother was allowed into the apartment mainly to do laundry. They falsified Duke's age and resume, drilled her for roles, and kept most of the money while giving her family little. Duke said that from age 13, they supplied her with alcohol and prescription pills, restricted contact with her parents, and made sexual advances toward her. She performed on Broadway, won an Oscar for The Miracle Worker, and starred in her own television series while remaining dependent on the couple for permission and cash. At 18, Duke married director Harry Falk and finally broke from the Rosses. After nearly $1 million had passed through their control, only an $84,000 trust fund remained in her name. 8. Baby Peggy, betrayed by her parents. Baby, music, Peggy supported her entire family before she was old enough to attend school. At 3, she was working 8-hour days, 6 days, music, a week, while her father quit his job and took control of her career. By 1923, Universal was paying her $1.5 million a year. Her parents spent the money on houses, cars, clothes, and family expenses. Nothing was reserved for Peggy's education or future. In 1925, her father argued with producer Sol Lesser over salary. Lesser canceled Peggy's contract and had her blackballed across Hollywood. Her parents then pushed her onto the vaudeville circuit, which paid the family about $300 a day. Peggy personally received 1 nickel per performance. By age 11, she was exhausted. The family's few investments had, music, vanished in the 1929 crash, and more than $2 million of her earnings had been spent. Music, Peggy kept performing while seriously ill. Buckets were placed in the wings so she could vomit before walking on stage, change, music, costume, and return for an encore. 9. Gloria Swanson, betrayed by Joseph P. Kennedy. Gloria Swanson trusted, music, her lover Joseph P. Kennedy to rescue her finances, then discovered that his gifts had been charged back to her. When they met in 1927, Swanson's, music, production debts had left her with only $65 in the bank. Kennedy took control, removed longtime employees, secured power of attorney for an associate, and created the Delaware-based Gloria Productions. He then backed Queen Kelly, which consumed more than $800,000 before sound was added, followed by another $60,000 for a proposed, musical number. The break came at a dinner in Swanson's rodeo drive home. She mentioned hearing that Kennedy had given a writer a Cadillac and billed it to Gloria Productions. Kennedy exploded, walked out, and disappeared. Days later, newspapers announced his retirement from her company. Swanson's former accountant examined the available records. Kennedy's studio bungalow, the mink coat he had presented as a gift, Queen Kelly's expenses, and other charges had all been placed on Gloria Productions. The debts exceeded $1 million, with Swanson listed, music, as solely responsible. 10. Groucho Marx, betrayed by Aaron Fleming. Groucho Marx was 80 when he hired 29-year-old Aaron Fleming to answer fan mail. Within years, she controlled, music, his schedule, company, and access to him. Fleming organized lucrative appearances, created Groucho Marx Productions, music, and became his secretary, companion, and manager. As Marx suffered strokes, music, and grew increasingly dependent, his children accused her of isolating him, exhausting him with performances, and directing gifts and assets toward herself. In 1977, a judge appointed screenwriter Nat Perrin as Marx's temporary guardian. Marx died that August. His will left Fleming a house, another property, a Mercedes-Benz, and half of Groucho Marx Productions, music, while his children received the remainder of an estate valued above $2.5 million. Bank of America, acting as executor, challenged transactions made while she managed him. California's labor commissioner found that Fleming had acted as an unlicensed talent agent and ordered her to return $80,000. In 1983, a jury rejected fraud, but found that she had breached Marx's fiduciary trust, awarding $221,842 in compensatory damages. The judge later struck the additional $250,000 punitive award. Music, 11. Doris Day betrayed by Martin Melcher and Jerome Rosenthal. Doris Day learned after her husband's death that he had, music, committed her to television without telling her and left her finances in the hands of a lawyer who profited from their losses. When Martin Melcher died in April 1968, Day discovered he had signed her to a CBS sitcom, The Doris Day Show, using his authority as husband and manager. She had never approved the series. Refusing could trigger a breach of contract claim, so 5 months later, she walked onto a television set she had never chosen. Her larger shock came from attorney Jerome Rosenthal, who controlled the couple's accounting, taxes, and investments. Court records showed that between 1956 and 1968, the Melchers lost more than $4 million in Rosenthal-backed oil and gas ventures, while Rosenthal secretly gained over $400,000. The court also found kickbacks, double fees, conflicts of interest, and failed hotel investments. After years of litigation, Day won a $26.4 million judgment for fraud, malpractice, and breach of fiduciary duty. Rosenthal's insurers ultimately paid only $6 million in annual installments. 12. Lillian Gish betrayed by Charles Duell. Lillian Gish trusted producer Charles Duell as her lawyer, financial advisor, and romantic partner. Then he rewrote their business relationship to keep control of her career. After leaving D.W. Griffith, Gish made The White Sister and Romola for Duell's music inspiration pictures. Her agreement promised a weekly salary, creative authority, and 15% music of the profits. While advising her legally, Duell repeatedly altered the contract, shifted obligations to his own company, and disputed money owed from the films. When Gish tried to leave, Duell sought a federal injunction forcing her to work exclusively for him. He also exposed their romance, claiming she had agreed to marry him, turning their private relationship and contract negotiations into national courtroom news. On April 2, 1925, Judge Julian Mack stopped the trial and dismissed Duell's case. He called it one of the most flagrant, outrageous breaches of trust he had encountered in 22 years. Mack ordered steps toward Duell's disbarment and a perjury investigation. Weeks later, a federal grand jury indicted him on 3 counts containing 24 accusations. 13. Rita Hayworth, betrayed by Edward Judson. Rita Hayworth escaped one controlling man by marrying another who treated her as a business asset. At 18, she married 41-year-old promoter Edward Judson, who became her manager and took charge of her money. He directed the transformation from Margarita Cancino into Rita Hayworth, ordering painful electrolysis to raise her hairline and dyeing her dark hair auburn. He also pushed her toward influential men, treating access to his wife as a bargaining tool. At one point, he tried to arrange a yacht encounter with Columbia chief Harry Cohn to advance her career. As Hayworth's fame grew, Judson's control tightened. She said he helped himself to her earnings and forced her to transfer substantial property into his hands. When she tried to leave, he demanded money and threatened her. Hayworth filed for divorce in February 1942. Her complaint stated that Judson threatened great bodily harm unless she paid him $12,000. The marriage was dissolved 3 months later after nearly 5 years under his control. 14. Mickey Rooney betrayed by his stepson. Mickey Rooney gave his stepson control of his money, mail, and work. Then said he was treated like a prisoner in his own home. In 2001, Christopher Aber added himself to Rooney's personal and business accounts. The lawsuit said he wrote checks to himself, transferred Rooney's income, opened company cards Rooney did not know existed, and controlled at least 10 American Express accounts. He also diverted bank statements and residual checks to a private post office box. Rooney said Aber withheld food and medication, blocked access to his finances, and threatened foreclosure and the loss of medical benefits unless the 90-year-old actor kept accepting paid appearances. When Rooney asked where his money had gone, he was told it was none of his business. A court-appointed conservator later reported that $400,000 was missing, and that Rooney could not afford Valentine's Day flowers for his wife. In March 2011, Rooney described the abuse before the U.S. Senate. 2 years later, a Los Angeles court entered a $2.8 million stipulated judgment against Aber and his wife and ordered the return of Rooney's memorabilia and personal property. 15. Dorothy Stratton, betrayed by Paul Snider. Dorothy Stratton trusted Paul Snider as the man who launched her career. When she tried to leave, he turned a final financial meeting into a trap. Snider met the 17-year-old Dairy Queen employee in 1978, persuaded her to pose nude, forged her mother's signature on the release and submitted the photographs to Playboy. After Stratton became Playmate of the Year, he controlled her clothes, food, money, and professional contacts. She married him reluctantly, telling a Playboy editor, "I owe it to him." During the filming of They All Laughed, Stratton began a relationship with director Peter Bogdanovich and sent Snider a separation letter. Snider hired a private investigator to follow them. On August 13, 1980, Stratton met a lawyer, requested a divorce, and insisted she would still support Snider financially. That day, Snider bought a used 12-gauge shotgun from a classified advertisement and told friends he was going to take up hunting. At noon the next day, Stratton arrived at their former home with $1,100 in her purse, apparently intended as an initial settlement payment. Instead of accepting her help and allowing her to leave, Snider attacked and killed her before taking his own life. Their bodies were discovered later that evening. In Hollywood, the people closest to a star often knew exactly where to strike. Clara Bow's closest friend stole her money in private letters, then exposed her secrets in court. Debbie Reynolds' husband gambled away both fortunes and left her sleeping in her car. Dorothy Stratton arrived with $1,100 for the husband she was leaving and never walked out. 1. Clara Bow, betrayed by Daisy DeVoe. Clara Bow gave Daisy DeVoe access to the money, letters, and secrets she hid even from the men in her life. DeVoe began as Bau's hairstylist, became her closest friend and secretary, and helped create a private account only the music two women could access. After Bau fired her in 1930, DeVoe left with the actress's checkbook, cash, jewelry, and personal music papers. She demanded $125,000 from Paramount for their return, then offered to give